Hello, beautiful people. I'm talking about how do you know when to stay in a relationship and when it is time to get out of there. And this can be a tricky thing when we feel like we are in a personal growth part of our lives, when we're evolving, we're awakening. And how do we know? Especially if the person we're with is not interested in waking up or personal growth. It can be a little tricky, but I got a few things that really have worked for me to be able to tell whether to stay or to go. Hello there. We are remembering our greatness together here on the topic of relationships. We're going to dive deep so we can rise high. You know, sometimes relationships can kind of keep us capped, right? As we go through our awakening process, we want to uncap the box, take off the glass ceiling, and we really want to be all of ourselves. Am I right? The thing is, guys, there's a few questions you can ask to decide whether you should stay or go. Now, I have been in a 17-year marriage and I have been with my guy for 18 years. And I am always in this kind of roller coaster, stay, go, and along with my growth process. And I always thought, isn't marriage supposed to be like 100%? Aren't you supposed to be like, I'm madly in love, I'm totally here forever? Well, the thing is, guys, marriage is a roller coaster ride, just like life. It's not a streamline, right? It's not a flat line of consistency. And I can truly say I have been madly in love with my husband. I have been ready to walk out the door for my husband. And I have been in partnership with my husband. I have been in unity and oneness and love with my husband. So I've been through this all. And it's a really interesting journey. First, I want to go over the topic of when you're with someone that's not wanting to be on the growth path. And then two, I'm going to give you the two tools that I use to how to know whether to stay or go. Okay, so the first thing is you have married someone, perhaps it's been good, maybe it's never been good, who knows, but all of a sudden you're on this awakening journey and you realize that your partner isn't. They're not interested in therapy. They're not interested in shadow work. They're just interested in the status quo. This is good enough and stuff like that. And you're like really wanting to evolve and you have popped into an awakening. What do? Well, there's two things. You can stay or you can go. How do you know? Is your light being compromised and snuffed every day? Are you being put down? Are you virtually kind of being spiritually abused, mentally abused, physically abused? Those three things, if that's a yes, get on out of there. If this person is kind of like an anchor for you, really holds the fort, really is a good provider, is really some structure for you while you're going through this spiral, the up and down spiral of awakening. And he's like, this isn't my thing, honey, but I'm here. So that might be a great scenario to stay. Let them be content where they are while you kind of do all this awakening, and they can really hold the fort for you. That can be actually a really good scenario. And two, it just might be too much of a contrast. You might want someone to relate to in these new topics that you're exploring on awakening and ascension and shadow work. And if that's the case, and this person just can't meet you, or you have some things that you really would like some therapy or alternative perspective on, and your partner's just 100% no on it, and you just can't connect, it may be time to go. So there's three different scenarios, right? There's too much of a contrast. It's just just can't relate anymore. Two is he's your anchor and it is working. Like, even though he's not interested in that stuff, he respects the stuff that you're going through, and he's willing to be your anchor, or she. um, and number three is sometimes the stuff we get into a relationship early on before our awakening process, and it just becomes abusive mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. That's a big get out of there. So those three things. Now I'm going to jump into part two with these two um, tools to use. And this might help those of you that have this partner that's not willing to jump on the awakening train with you. So I have a husband that is on the awakening journey with me. He's very willing to do personal growth work. He meditates every day. When I want to, he'll go to therapy with me. He'll suggest therapy. So I have someone that's kind of on that journey. So I don't have that first scenario. So it's a little different in my case. But I do go through these really big awakenings that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, is this right anymore, kind of thing. So these are the two things that work for me. One, I ask the question, what will my life be like in 5 years if I stayed in this relationship? The second part of this is, what will my life be like in 5 years if I left this relationship? And when you ask those questions, you're not looking for a logical answer. You're looking for whether it expands or whether it contracts. Lightness and your soul journey, for your soul journey, will expand. The contraction will be like, it's deadening your soul. So follow that. Ask those two questions. Follow the awareness that you get. Is it light and expansive, or is it contracted and heavy? That will give you a real strong clue. And every time I've asked those questions in my past, it's expansive, so I stay. The second tool is kind of similar. It's just light or heavy. If you tune into the relationship, is it expansive or is it contracting? So this is really valuable information, because when we get into the day-to-day and butting heads, we can be like, screw this. This is too hard. I don't want to do this. Yet, if it's light, you'll still feel this expansive lightness, even though it's hard and annoying. Isn't that weird? So this light heavy thing is super powerful, because we really want to get out of our logical thinking around relationships, especially in this awakening process. Because sometimes this stuff isn't logical. This person could really be our soulmate, meaning someone in our soul group that's willing to partner with us to totally help us get to our ascension journey, expand our soul, help us with enlightenment. So it's super important to tune in to whether it is light and expansive or contracted and heavy. And that first question kind of helps you with that. What would my life be like in 5 years? The other thing is, so those are the two things, those two questions, and then the light and heavy. But there's another piece to this. Sometimes it may be really light, but the contrast, you're just like, I don't want to live like this. I know this person's good for my soul journey, but there's just certain things I just don't want to live out anymore with this person. So I was having a talk with a girlfriend of mine, and she was talking about her ex-husband and how he had a lot of similarities to her current husband. So I asked her the question. I was like, well, that's very interesting. So a lot of times we say, if we leave a relationship, be aware that you could be attracting the same thing in your next relationship if you haven't worked through it. She's like, you know what? They both have this one piece that my soul really requires for personal growth. However, my husband now has qualities that make it easier and more fun to work through that. Where her ex-husband had that quality that she was really requiring in a partner, yet he had other qualities that were like just not real fun to be around. So she was like, you know what? She left that relationship and there was a piece that wasn't worked out yet. She found it in this new relationship, but with qualities that made it more palatable. So there's always that. So be aware that if you leave a relationship with some unresolved things, that it will show up in another relationship. But you may get lucky, like my friend, and find a relationship that has other components that make it easier to work through this harder kind of shadow work. Our relationships are such potent tools for us to work through shadow work and increase in our awakening and our vibration, our ascension journey. So it's really important to feel into whether to stay or whether to go. So in my early 30s, I was doing a lot of yoga, and I remember being on my yoga mat. And I got this download. That getting married and having kids was going to be kind of like my dharma and my satsang, if you will. Like, it was going to be the thing that kind of really awakened me. And so I listened, and what I was listening to was that, hey, being on a yoga mat, being on your own, it's kind of easy for you. So go do something not easy. And go get a husband and some kids. And I was like, all right, let's go do this. So within 6 months, I was pregnant and getting married. Went fast. It goes really fast once you make a choice and you say, going for this. Long story short, I have a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 17-year-old marriage. So it's been beautiful. It's been a beautiful unfolding. And you know what? That guidance on that yoga mat that many years ago, 18, 19 years ago, was spot on. Spot on. Honestly, like, the growth that I've gone through with this family, with these kids, with this man has been phenomenal, and has been worth all the valleys, because the peaks are pretty amazing. And the way my husband has my back through all the ups and downs, and it's something to learn from, because I can be a little bit more finicky, if I'm honest. So if I left early on, after, like, say 4 or 5 years, when things got really tough, I really would have missed out on a lot of personal growth. Now, I may have gotten it from another relationship, for sure. And so there is no right or wrong, really. But when you have something that is worth being in, I don't want to say worth fighting for, because we really want some more ease and bliss and joy in our lives while we're in these relationships. But sometimes there is some deep work to do. The video I did before this talks about 6 things to do to keep a relationship blissful, and really powerful, because I use all 6 of those things every day in my relationship. It's key. It really is key. Decide whether you are going to stay or go, and then go back and review those 6 things on how to keep in that bliss to when you're in that relationship. Because honestly, like, if it's not blissful, it feels really hard. So that we do have to have some blissful peaks to help us stay when things are in the valley. And you can have a lot of bliss in a long-term relationship during your awakening. And that said, it also, you can have a lot of bliss on your own if you leave the relationship. So just really get clear on the expansiveness or the contractedness, and get out of your head around it, because all those pros and cons and the mental logical stuff, I've noticed, when you're in the awakening and ascension process, doesn't really add up. So follow the light and heaviness of it. All right, beautiful people, let's hear in the comments how your relationship is going and what works for you. We're remembering our greatness together. Be sure to subscribe, like, and click that bell. We'd love to have you in this high vibe tribe. Namaste.